So, welcome, and I would like to thank you all for being here tonight for a talk by the Brazilian architect Carla Juaçaba. But first, I will briefly mention a few upcoming public programs here at the GSD. So this Thursday evening in this room, we'll have the Rouse Visiting Artist Lecture with production designer Hannah Beechler and cinema scholar Jacqueline Stewart. Friday at the noontime, we'll have architect and architecture historian Mohammed Al-Assad lecturing. And next Thursday, again in this room, we'll have Sue Fujimoto here. So stay tuned, guys. And I'd also like to mention briefly that this lecture is generously supported by the Rachel Dorothy Tanner Memorial Lectureship Fund. So tonight, we are really honored to be joined by Carla Juaçaba, whose experimental work spans exhibition design, temporary installations, and housing. And I think this range, this real range of work, along with her obvious notable accomplishments within it, is particularly inspiring to those of us here tonight. Since 2000, Carla has developed her independent practice of research and architecture from its base in Rio de Janeiro, where her office is currently engaged in both cultural programs and private projects. Carla was the winner of the first edition of the International ArcVision Women in Architecture Prize, honoring her in particular for her remarkable and ephemeral Pavilion Humanidade for the United Nations Conference on Sustainable Development. So this was a work conceived with the theater director Bia Lessa, and the project opened to a kilometer-long line of spectators, which for those of us here is pretty amazing, over half a mile. I think that's an incredible detail. And in some ways was a realization of Cedric Price and Joanne Littlewood's Fun Palace. Though unlike the Fun Palace, as Carla notes, the pavilion produced not an image of the future, but instead tested the capacity of what was materially and ecologically possible in the present. Carla has worked on many notable house projects: Atelier House, Rio Bonito House, Varanda House, Santa Teresa House, as well as exhibition designs. She frequently takes part in academic and teaching opportunities, as well as research. She's lectured recently at the GSD, 2015. We're welcome to have you, really welcome back. Colombia's GSAPP, the Academia di Architettura Mendrisio. She's led workshops at the IUAV di Venezia and been on the jury of the BIAU Bienal Ibero Americana in Madrid. So, excuse me, most recently, Carla has contributed to the current Venice Architecture Biennale, creating the project entitled Ballast, which was a set of concrete totems in the Giardini. Also, she was one of the architects commissioned for the Vatican Chapels for the Holy See Pavilion, which is kind of an incredible project that you should continue to check out. And Joacaba's Chapel, which to me sort of embodies in a single structure maybe the entire experience of the Woodland Cemetery. Like, it's incredible. So I really am excited to see that tonight. And please join me in welcoming Carla Juaçaba.
Thank you, Jenny, for the introduction. Thank you for the invitation and your presence. I will begin exactly with the chapel. The title is Empty Space because I think Peter Brook is a theater director, and I did a workshop with his scenographer, which makes me think that it was very interesting to understand our discipline through another discipline, that is the theater. So empty space for him is any space in which theater takes place. And this beautiful image is from his Magic Flute theater, and he's an English theater director that lives in France, and he had a successful company in the 70s, 80s, and he uses the expression port theater for his theater. And what is wonderful to understand about his work is that in his theater, the imagination fulfills the image. The image is not complete there. So, and he constructed that with very poor elements. For example, in this image, he moved the bamboo and is the cross, and then in the second moment, it's a forest. So it's very full of meanings. And also his sentence, is empty space insufficient? If the answer is yes, then we begin to study what are the indispensable elements. And I think all his work and theoretical work too is very inspiring. And this Lina Bobardi chair, the name of this chair is Cadeira na beira de estrada, which means chair in the middle of the road. She also defines her architecture as poor architecture, and which obviously in her case is a direct reference to her Italian context, arte povera context, where she was before moving to Brazil. And I really like those two examples because it is inhabited to Lina Bobardi seated, and the actor is moving sticks of bamboo. And I think this is very beautiful when it's inhabited. And the sentence of Aldo Rossi about theater is the sentence of Aldo Rossi is, theater is very similar to architecture because both involve an event, even if this event happens or not. So this is a sentence that I want to use for this chapel because I think I heard many times that the chapel is a sculpture or the chapel is an installation, but I don't think so. I think it is architecture because the event happens. It favors this event, as Aldo Rossi says. So the chapel is inside. The chapel is in the San Giorgio Maggiore Island, the island in front of Piazza San Marco. And this island was never open to the public before. It's the first time. So the pavilion of the Holy See is taking part for the first time after 32 years of event. And Cardinal Ravasi, who is the Pontifical Council of Culture, said that it happened because of Papa Francisco, because he began his pontificate with a manifest that believed in beauty to evangelize. So all this happened because of Papa Francisco. The concept used by Francesco Dalco, the curator, was inspired by Gunnar Asplund's woodland chapel, designed in 1920 for Stockholm Cemetery. So, here's the island and all this green part of the island. Yeah, the 10 chapels are there. So those are the architects invited for the chapel. Blumen, United States, Francesco Cellini, Italy, Corvalán, Paraguay, we have Flores and Prats, Thomas Foster, Fujimori, St. Godwell, Hadik, and Sotojimura. And this is the plan. In the entrance, I'm here in the entrance of Sotojimura, which I think it was a very nice choice from the curator, because I mean he put the heaviest one aside the lightest one, and it was very beautiful to see this together. This is a video from Francesco Dalco that's sent to all of us to explain the site. And in a way, it is very good because we can feel this water behind and this light of Venice. So. And this is the side, so you can feel that this space is behind the green area. And this is the project. The chapel is made of two crosses. The cross down is a bench, and the standing cross is in fact the cross. So these are the two old elements, not symbols, but elements of the Catholic Church. This is a very old program. You go to the chapel and sit to look at the suffering that is the cross. So it is a synthesis of this program. 4 steel beams with 8 meters in length composes the object, and it is elevated by these 7 concrete elements. All the pieces, including the concrete part, has 12 by 12 centimeters. And I think actually only 3 of them were needed for the foundation, but I think 7 gave like a metric to the drawing, to the design. So it gives a measure to the object. This is the site plan with this shadow. I thought that the project would be so invisible that the shadow would become more evident than the object. And this is the lateral view. And the front of view, it's I didn't know when I proposed the chapel, but it's St. Peter's Cross when the cross is inverted. So the horizontal part is lower because St. Peter considered himself unworthy to be crucified as Jesus. And this cross became the symbol of humility. And I think it was very beautiful to discover that after everything was done. So these are a few detailing drawings, and I think it's important to show because everything looked very easy to do, but it was not. The chapel, the reinforcements were needed inside the bench and the cross, and everything should be bolted, not welded, because the first idea was to transport this chapel to somewhere else. But I just knew last week that it will be part of the Italian heritage, and they won't take it out from Venice, which looks like a dream for me, because it's like I just realized that this is the project of my dream, because to have a chapel in Venice that will stay there, it's amazing. And and now all the bolted parts at the end, they are in a hidden point where we cannot see. So everything, there's only one point welded. That is the junction of the horizontal part with the vertical part. And so this is the reinforcement, and the welded part that it's there it's here, exactly here, and it is made of, and this. In the first moment, I didn't know the material, but in the second moment, I decided to be with a highly polished stainless steel to reflect the surrounding, to not exist. Wait. So this is the detail for the cross, the connection of the cross, the junction between the two parts, the horizontal and the vertical. This is the foundation, the 3 points of the foundation. And this is where the problem was, because they didn't want to weld it, and I said, this part we have to weld. And this is the final prototypes with this part finally welded, with a lot of discussions about this. And the construction began. I was not there, but I was following. I love this picture of the foundation. It looked like small graves. It's very beautiful on the side, I think. And I never associated these concrete pieces with an osteology image or osteology forum, but I have a friend, Ana Luisa Nobre, is a teacher from the Catholic University in Rio, that wrote a test about the chapel. And she wrote, there is a possible analogy with Rossi's backbone for the Modena cemetery. A body reduced to its bone, purified towards the absolute. The entire text of Anna is very beautiful, but I translated this part because of her reference to Rossi's work. And this is her text about the chapel, and this is the cemetery of Aldo Rossi, where she took the reference to write about this analogy of backbone. And this is the first picture I received from João Carreiro da Graça, the incredible Portuguese architect that were there before me. And I think it's a very beautiful picture because it's imperfect. The sun is exploded here, and I mean the photographer would never take a picture like this, wait for the perfect sun, and this is the very formal opening and area view. And I think the chapel is, the intention was to be almost invisible, and I think it speaks metaphorically about the passage of life, about the existence and non-existence. So sometimes it's you can see it or not. I think that the space of the chapel is completed by the surrounding vegetation. So there is an interior, and there is also an imaginary dome between these trees. Now, as I have said, I heard that this is a sculpture or this is an installation, but I don't think so. I think it's architecture because it defines a place, there is a program, and it favors an event, as Aldo Rossi says. And I also think that it's very distant from any minimalist idea, because I think the minimalism abstains completely for any kind of symbolism. Yet I think this chapel, as well as the work of Peter Brook, is full of meaning, full of symbolism. I have chosen the Souto de Moura's chapel to show also, because it's a side, because it's heavy, because it's very Portuguese and heavy, and this is in a way very Brazilian. I think very related to nature, and this is me very happy there. And then those pictures, this look like it was composed, but not. But this priest was there before the opening for hours, and he was in love. It was very nice to see. And this is a video of Gabriel Kogan. I don't know how to do it. Is it working? Yes. Yes, it's a really nice video, I think, because everything moves a little bit. It's beautiful. And Soto de Moura, with his heavy chapel, he was inspired by small chapels built in Minho, a city near to Braga, the city Braga in Portugal. And it is exactly like this. It's very closed, and there's no coat. It's only a place to stay. And this is another homemade with mobile phone, but it's nice to see. And those are Instagram pictures that I love because there's people, it's very, very spontaneous, and it's nice to see. And this is the chapel of Soto de Moura that is here. And this is the entrance here. And then I brought the Humanidade Pavilion again because I've been here 3 years ago presenting this project, but it was important to bring because I'm going to show that there was a commission to continue this building in the city of São Paulo, in the center, and in Brasilia. But the crisis in Brazil began in 2014 and everything has stopped, but I will show the idea of this project. It's not yet a project, but it's an idea. And the pavilion is here, in this peninsula between Copacabana and Ipanema. And this is the time lapse of the construction. It was constructed in 6 months, and the project was 4 months. And as Jenny said, there was 200,000 people visiting in 2 weeks, and the idea came from this. Copacabana in Brazil is like the stage. Everything happens there, all the events. So the base of this construction was already there, and with a white plastic tent over that. And what I proposed was to take out the plastic tent and continue scaffolding walls that were already there, and. So I understand this building as a response to our time, to our idea of sustainability in this location, in this geographical point, in this well, it's very site-specific. So there's no rhetorical images about sustainability because it is in fact a direct response to this context and to this pre-existence. So. And it's there, so the walls were already there, those walls, but with 5 meters high. And this is the construction they do every year. And this is what happened. We took out the plastic tent and continued those walls. The project was like happening between the walls and also in the subtraction of those walls. For example, the auditorium for 500 people. So this is the line, the main line. And this is the corridor that was already there, already exists. And then the idea for Brasilia is, it's a very hard place to think about anything, because the project of the urbanist project is from Lúcio Costa, the work of Oscar Niemeyer, and it's a scale, it's a very hard scale to intervene, to propose anything. So it took me a very long time to find this idea of project that I will show you. This is the drawing, only to remember this. This is the drawing of Lúcio Costa. This is a cross in this very isolated and central part of Brazil, very desert. And he won this competition with this drawing. And this is the first symbol, the cross, of possession of a territory. So when he and this curve here appears when it was adapted to the local topography and the outflows of the water. So this looks like a bird because of that. So this is a very known picture of Brasilia, and you can feel already this scale of someone that is here. That it's an unreachable scale. It's very hard to work. And this is the area view. This is the this is the central area of the ministeries. This is all the ministeries. This is the Congress at the end here. And the idea was very simple at the end, was to repeat one of those ministeries with the same height, the same measure, the same distance between them in this space, this free space here. So it was, the proposal is almost like a urban ready-made. It is there, and as any ready-made, it wants to be indifferent to any kind of beauty. There is a complete absence of design also, so it would be constructed also with scaffolding, but with these dimensions, and this could be the sequence of the Humanidade Pavilion there. And I named this. I name it Ministry of All, because it's aside all the ministries. So, and in São Paulo, it's another project. It is in this area here of, this is really the center of São Paulo. This is the station, and this is the project of Palmande da Rocha. Oh, não, me esqueci. Pinacoteca. And then it's a project that in the central area here to the station, it's in this empty area here. But the project could be situated in any place with the same characteristics, with the same problems, because it's not about this place exactly. It's about a reflection about emptiness and abandoned spaces in central areas. So especially in central areas, I mean, because it's active, very active areas with these immense gaps. So the proposal is not to resolve this problem, this gap. On the contrary, it emphasizes the problem. It's also an idea of continuity of the Humanidade Pavilion, so it would be also temporary. So I think these empty areas in places like this is very common in Latin America. And what I proposed is, and I think also that those empty areas, it's like a space that no one ventures to cross the space. It's like a rupture. And I mean, no one wants to traverse this. It's very empty, and there's like an imaginary wall, I think. So the project is in fact a wall that emphasizes this rupture. The problem becomes more evident, and the building is a symbol of the problem. So it is projected over the existing road, now secluded by scaffolding walls. And there's this one only floor that everything happens with 5,000 square meters. And I name it, only to name, São Paulo Observatory, a vivacious and energetic place for exhibit and discuss the city of São Paulo. It kind of invented a program to continue this idea. So on the contrary of a solution, this temporary building proposes to reflect about the urban problems, about the interstitial and forbidden places, and it's obviously a fantasy. And I will change the subject completely now to the projects that I'm working, housing projects and exhibition design projects. The common characteristics of all these houses is that they are situated in the perimeter of Rio de Janeiro, and in this perimeter where the city, between the city and the forest, the preserved area. And also what they have in common is that they are very inexpensive houses, and never bigger than 160 square meters. So this is the plan. The house develops here as develops as a pavilion parallel to the contour lines. It is totally adapted to the terrain in 2 levels, invisible from the street. It is in the central region of Rio. So the first challenge was to develop an inexpensive project and not too big. And so I proposed this very, very lightweight structure, each 2 meters, and it made the project possible because it was very cheap. And this is the living room here, and connected with this corridor to the rooms. And there is only one. How can I say this? Rigid line. It's 42 meters of a rigid line here with different inclinations of the roof. So that's it. So the roof is the most important element of the design, with 4 different inclinations, different materials. And this is the gallery that connects everything, very close to the street and very open to the view. And I think this is the important thing of the project. And it becomes a flashlight at night. And this is another house very close to this one. I think, I'm not sure if I presented this one. This is again a reference to this arte povera that needs a knife and a support and an act to. And this is an inspiring image for this project, I think, because this house, the name House Varanda, was made in 2008. And I think the site was incredibly beautiful, and I had the feeling that I was destroying something. Alvaro Siza said once that sometimes construct is to destroy. So finally, I was not trying to hide the house in any side of the terrain. The house cut the terrain in two. In a skylight, with this skylight here, emphasize this decision of cutting a terrain in two. It's a 60 centimeters by 24 meters of skylight. Finally, the last presence I was looking for had to be very incisive. This is the central is the living room, and the bedrooms in the extreme. This is also the commission was to be very inexpensive. This is the most inexpensive roof, and everything else also. So the parallel walls was a support for this light. There's what is important also in this house. I think there's an immense, with 1.5 meters of the roof is projected 1.5 meters, so you open the windows, and when it's raining, not the contrary. And this is the last exhibition design that I did in Instituto Moreira Salles in Rio de Janeiro. And this is Viagem das Carrancas, the name of the exhibition. And carranca is a sculpture with a human or animal form. And it is used in the frontal part of the boats in the Amazon River. And this gained, with time, a cultural value. So Lino Bobard in the 60s also did an exhibition with these sculptures. And it was very, very beautiful, her exhibition, I think, because she did a very high support to make the sculptures like they are in the boat in a high point, so you can see it. So I think it gave like a nobleness to this sculpture. And I decided also to do like her, to put it in a higher position, but with a very different design. This is another exhibition at the Modern Art Museum about the Brazilian jewelry, and I have only 2 pictures of this. And it's scenographies many times. I mean, it's like a scenery. This is pieces of glasses, like as a reference to the water, where the stone of the jewelry came from. It was very nice to do. And this is Ballast, the project that was an invitation of Yvonne and Shelley. It was, I'm going to show this project, but it didn't really work out as we wanted. So it was a response to Free Space Manifesto that evokes a generous and very democratic space. And they give an example, they give many examples in the manifest, but one of them is the Medici Palace in Florence that represent a power and wealth, but with a stone seat, which forms part of the solid facade, almost turns the beauty inside out. This is what they wrote. The solid wall becomes the enclosing wall of the public space. So it's like a generous piece, they said. So the idea, the proposal was to do for the Biennale a bench with 32 meters long, 3 benches of 32 meters long for people to sit and rest in the Biennale, because we are all always tired in the Biennale. So it's I understand I understand the democratic space where everyone can sit and lay. So this was made. The proposal of this bench was to use navy robes, which is something that we see in Venice all the time. And a reference also to the city fences. In the project, it would be like these cables of navy ropes and these pieces of concrete, two different pieces, but disposed differently. And they wanted to do that, Yvonne and Shelley, but it was very expensive because I learned a lot about cables. I didn't know nothing about cables, but it looks very light for this heavy piece, but it's not. This was not enough to the strength of this cable, the horizontal strength of this cable. So this was supposed to be made with a very special concrete, which made everything very expensive and not able to do that. But we found out that in February, and I said no, so we don't do anything. And they said no, we're going to do at least to show this project and at least do a prototypes of this. And it was an idea, but I don't think it was. So this was the idea of these benches. And inside, of course not, but it was in an exigence to show it inside. So. And the problem of cables, the study, many months to study this, and many months of work to make this work, and finally it was impossible. So we did finally prototypes with 1/3 prototypes of the size of these blocks, only to exhibit an idea, but it was not. Finally, it was not a bench, it was not a sculpture, it was not, but it was an intention to show the project only. And this is the very simple foundation at the end, but they didn't approve this in Venice because it's not possible to do 25 centimeters of foundation. So the pieces of concrete, they are bigger like this, 3.60 meters, and they get stability only when they are together. And this is the prototype. So in the garden of Giardini, the Giardini where the work of Cisa is. So the work is there. The name that has the name is Percorso. So finally, it was nothing, but it was an experience. But people sit at there and use it like this too. And I'm going to return to the chapel to show that it became, the kids really have fun with this chapel. And I was not expecting this, but it was very nice to know. And this is my son having fun. He says, "My mother chapel is very fun." So it's very good to hear that. So, thank you very much. That's I was worried to bring a project that I already showed before, but that's okay.
I'm going to open up the audience's questions.
Does anyone want the mic for anything? Oh, yes.
Oh, we have a second mic. Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, thanks so much for sharing your projects with us. I'm curious, for working in a context like Santa Teresa in Rio, where you also have the well-preserved turn-of-the-century architecture, as well as some great modernist gems, I was wondering whether it was of any concern of working in that context of how to respond to these different traditions of Brazilian architecture.
I was not worried. The context is always a lot of nature, and these houses are very far, and it's not really something to worry about. It's more like I respond to this context. How to I mean, that was the first project, very expensive. That the house was floating there, and it was impossible to do. And then finally, the decisions to put really on the floor to make it inexpensive. But this is sometimes not very good for Rio because of the humidity there. So it was more a decision about cost. So, but.
Hi, thank you for talking to us. I was wondering, for the piece that you tried out at the biennial, why did you say that it isn't a sculpture?
Because finally it is a sculpture if you want, but it was supposed to be a support of a bench. And it was yes, this was the idea, not to be a sculpture in the garden. So that's why. I mean, so this is a prototype, finally.
Thank you for being here. I think one of the most compelling things about your projects was this chapel and the video of it sort of like trembling with all the leaves and stuff. So I guess in light of these discoveries, how would you design in the future to have more of these like happy little like strange things? I don't know.
I didn't get the question, sorry.
Can you plan for the happy trembling of the chapel?
Or like was that anticipated? Like do you design for encountering nature in that specific way?
It's a question.
Maybe it's not a question, I just think it's cool.
I think maybe a way of saying that is, do you feel like you encounter your work differently, and once it's in the world, does it produce other effects that you might not have anticipated, right? Is that what you're saying, Frankie?
You mean it's in Venice, so it's another context, that's it? That's maybe the question.
In any of the work, right? Does it exist on its own in ways that you couldn't have anticipated and that you might then plan for in the future?
I still don't get. I'm sorry. I'm very sorry.
So you wanted to make a seat, right?
Yeah.
And this, you spent a lot of time thinking about this seat.
Mm-hmm.
And you came up with the structure to make this seat with the ropes and everything possible.
Mm-hmm.
In the end, this was not possible. And so you have the remnants, the leftover of an idea. But the person who was asking the question was saying, well, what you ended up with, you didn't want it to be a seat, you wanted the rope to be the seat, but now you have people enjoying your structure, which was not planned to be a seat, now used as a seat. So is it possible to think about something that is not planned? This was not planned to be a seat. So the idea of unintended consequences are sometimes very interesting. Can you imagine thinking about a slightly different way of working, where something like the structure is actually the seat, not the rope anymore. So this could also be a way of thinking. I think this is maybe a little bit part of it. I mean, it also relates to the beginning of your presentation about Peter Brook, because part of the discussion with Peter Brook is about the idea of architecture as a kind of setting, as a situation, as a theater, in a way. It's a space of performance. So if you work in this way, you also start imagining how your son is going to be playing with this. So I think this connection between the event, the theater, and architecture is very important in your work, even though you don't say it so explicitly. So this, I think, is interesting, whether you see in your work this connection to theater and to the idea of situation, and what is the possibility of architecture when you think about it in those terms. I think this kind of speculation, I think, for us and for the students is probably an interesting thing to discuss, you know.
Yes. Yes, for example, the project of Brasilia. It's not a project yet, but it's something to develop. But I think, and there's a proud way of saying that there's no design, there's the absence of design there, because it's as any ready-made. And I would be very curious to develop this and see the life inside this that have no idea what it is in the program of that. So maybe this is an open project to think about this and this thing that we don't know.
I mean, I think this line of questioning is very interesting. I wonder if you can elaborate a little bit more about this relationship that you have with art and architecture. I understand you studied under Ligue Pape, you know. So you know, I don't know if there's a new concrete art lineage in your work that's very participatory, you know, because I find it very interesting when I hear you talk about Peter Brook or Pina Bausch. There's always this theatrical element, and then you talk about Rossi, which is, on one hand, for him, architecture is architecture, or the background for activities, or the stage set. I wonder if you see some conflict between that, because, or maybe it's not conflict at all, something that fused together with this kind of art background, and think of architecture as something that's much more internal and intrinsic. You know, even when you talk about your strategies as art terms, like as found objects or objet trouvé, of that, you know, very interesting in your way of thinking, and this relationship between this kind of architecture thinking and art thinking.
Yes, I'm still thinking about this, but I think there are a few projects that are a response to a reflection that is not exactly as, for example, the project of São Paulo. It doesn't want to be a project of architecture. It wants to be a response to a reflection of this emptiness, but it doesn't want to be a project at the same time. It wants to be, it's in between, exactly, because the reflection is in between. I mean, it's not really a project of architecture that will make the site better. No, it will make the site worse. So it's the contrary. So it is something to think about. It is. Yes.
Hi. I was just wondering if you find that there's a central element or motivation to your work that happens either intentionally or unintentionally for across the board.
Yes, I think I always need something to provoke a problem, as it is in Brazil, in São Paulo, or I could never imagine to think of a project just to think. I mean, if there's no problem to think, if there's no program to think, so the next project is I cannot think of the next project because I need a problem. So it's a response to a problem, or in this cases of São Paulo, in Brazil, I invented a problem, and to build something that I don't know if it's architecture or art, because it doesn't. Architecture wants to resolve problems, so, and make life better, and so that's not the question. So. Yeah.
Hi, over here. Thank you for your presentation. So I see in your architecture a theme of lightness, openness, and transparency. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about the aesthetic and tectonic choices, the reasons behind those choices.
Yes, I think
you agree with me.
When I said that the chapel is very Brazilian, I think the Brazilian architecture has always this obsession of floating things. I mean, São Paulo architecture, you can see that. So it's part of this line that floats always. That's why the Soto de Moura is very Portuguese and heavy, and I think this is very Brazilian because it wants to have a suspended line as the bench also, even with the heavy support. So I think there is this reference. You asked also about GSAPP, because the school I studied was, she left the school when I was there, but it was very interesting because she kind of constructed a school of architecture, but with her conceptions of art. So when I arrived there, the exercises were constructed by her. It's funny because her work is known, but not her academic work, which is very, very experimental and very interesting. So I think it was very important, that was not direct with her.
If there's one last question, we can take it. And anybody? Otherwise, thank you so much, Carla. It was
thank you so much.
Really incredible.
Thank you.